just listen.
Often, because we are breathing in a way that allows access to the subconscious, whatever is available and ready to come up to the surface might arise.
So this was very nice to walk in here.
Cool.
It was very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have no formal start.
Okay.
So
excellent.
I
We
may
can just go.
even leave some of this in.
Yeah. But I think that's a really good point, that, healing is about creating the environment in which healing can happen.
Yes.
You're just supporting the body's ability to heal itself.
Yeah.
And so we don't drop into that healing mode if we don't feel safe, if we don't feel comfortable, if we don't feel connected.
Yes.
So for me, it's always been important to create the environment and the space in which people feel safe.
Yeah. And maybe if you go into a traditional general practitioner's office, you see all these posters on the wall about illness and things that may be actually bad for the patient.
Yeah.
Come to think of it now.
Yeah.
Where this kind of made you feel like, I can just breathe here, I can chill.
Yeah. I think it's always important for me, to make the patient feel that they are well, that they are whole, rather than reinforcing the idea that they're sick.
Yes.
It's about nurturing the aspect of them that is whole, that is healthy, supporting that.
Yes. Yeah. No, for sure. Well, we are live now. So thank you very much for doing this and giving the time to do this. Just on what we've been speaking of now, when did you start looking at the holistic integrative way of healing, coming from a background in, let's call it the traditional medicine that we all know?
I think it began even before I studied medicine, actually. And
okay.
I suppose it was the way I grew up, my relationship with my grandfather. I think I was always aware of nature, of our connection with nature, and just stories of my grandfather growing up and the values he instilled in me. I suppose that kind of way of seeing the world has always been with me. And so, when I studied medicine, that was another part of the journey to become a doctor and to really understand the intricacies of the way we are designed and how disease shows up and how to treat it.
Yes.
And so that was an important part of my journey. But when I started practicing medicine as a GP, my desire to practice more holistically became even more apparent. And I realized that the conventional medicine training often didn't support me to, support the whole person.
Yeah.
And that the training was limited in some way. For example, there's very little focus on nutrition. There's very little focus on the link between our psychological well-being and our physical well-being. And yet that was so obvious to me.
Yes.
And so I wanted to understand that connection. I wanted to know how to make patients more aware of that connection, that they felt more empowered to understand and heal themselves.
Why is that link missing? There is a lot of science that backs up that obviously nutrition is good for our health and well-being, and things like meditation and breathwork come from centuries ago. Why has it not been added to the medical field of studying?
Well, I think that's what medicine was originally. If we go back to the ancient traditional healing systems of Ayurveda, of traditional Chinese medicine, we saw that there was a deep understanding that health is dependent on our relationship with nature, that we are part of nature's cycles and rhythms, but with the whole Cartesian model where we, broke down health into systems, we became narrow focused and we looked at specific systems as separately functioning.
Yes.
And we lost that everything is actually connected. And we lost the connection with health as an aspect of our spiritual well-being, of our psychological well-being. And, it was then seen as unscientific.
Yes.
And now it's interesting that this is shifting again. that through so much research in this field, we are starting to now prove that this link exists.
Yes.
You know, and so slowly we're making our way back to regional health systems, but in a way that science can validate.
Yes. But it doesn't discount the medicine field and the degree of medicine. There's obviously still an important role to play in that.
Well, of course, you know, I mean, if I wanted to have a heart transplant, I want to go to the very best cardiothoracic surgeon out there. You know,
Yes.
if I was in a car accident, I want the very best doctor. And so, you know, there's a role for Western medicine. But I feel that we have lost the basic foundations of health.
Yes.
And so in order to build the future of medicine, which I believe is a more integrated approach,
Yes.
then we have to go back to the foundation of health and of well-being. You know, we have to reteach ourselves
Yes.
what that means. And so I think in the process of Western medicine, or this paradigm taking over, it's been disempowering in a way. And not just for the patient, because they've lost the ability to kind of heal themselves, but it's also disempowering for the medical system in a way, because it just kind of burdens the medical system more.
Yeah.
You know, and so I think it becomes a vicious cycle. And through this whole COVID experience, with less people visiting doctors for little ailments, it's been interesting to see the shift now.
Yes.
That people are looking for ways to support their well-being
Yes.
in a simpler and more empowering way.
Yeah. Maybe it's slowed down people's lifestyles so that they can start realizing that I'm actually not well, but I'm not sick, but I'm not well. And
Right.
how can I become better in that sense? And we're looking at people doing more yoga, more meditation, and breath work. How has COVID-19 affected your practice?
Yeah, it's interesting. I haven't slowed down at all. So
Good.
the nature of my practice means that I could move online.
Yes.
So I do a lot of health coaching and a lot of breath work, and I was able to transition that aspect of my practice online.
Yes.
And it's just really, it doesn't take away from the connection. I find that, you know, that connection is still possible. And I've moved a lot of my breathwork sessions and trainings and seminars online.
Yeah.
And there's just been such a need for it,
Yes.
you know, so I've been incredibly busy.
Oh, that's good news then.
Yeah.
I want to just backtrack a little bit and ask you about your grandfather, because it seems that he's obviously played an important role in your life and your career.
Yes,
Do
absolutely.
you want to talk about that relationship and why him specifically was so significant?
Yeah, so my grandfather grew up in India, and he came to South Africa when he was 14 years old with his father.
Okay, cool.
And so soon after he came to South Africa, his dad died. And so he had to fend for himself, and always had dreams of being a doctor.
Yes.
But that wasn't possible, and he went into business. But he was able then to put two of his sons through medical school.
Oh, wow.
And so my father was his eldest son and was in the business with him, and my dad passed away when I was 3. And so I grew up in an extended Indian family, traditional family setup. And so when my dad died, my grandfather really stepped in as the father, as
Yes.
the primary kind of, father figure.
Yes.
And it was really special because we spent so much time together. You know, I listened to so many of his stories of his childhood in India, and
Yeah.
I would spend time with him walking in the garden, and he would show me the trees, and, we would walk amongst the fruit trees. And it was just, I spent time painting with him, and he was a writer as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think, his essence kind of still lives with me in a way.
That's very cool. And in that process, when do you realize that you want to be a healer and someone that helps people for a living?
Yeah. I feel in some way that's always been with me. And in fact, it goes back to my grandfather again.
Yes.
So when I was 14 years old, he got ill and he went into heart failure.
Wow.
And I remember spending a lot of time with him when he was ill and in his last days, you know, just nursing him, being with him, caring for him, and just, you know, being with him, being present as he was dying was an incredibly profound experience for me.
Yes.
And I suppose it was my first experience of healing in some way,
Yeah.
you know. And coming from a family of medical doctors, I guess it was my natural path.
Yeah. It seems to be one of those fields that has to kind of be something you're born with, similar to being a teacher maybe. It's in the family, and it's maybe the house you grow in, but it might be something connected to genetics. I don't know.
You could be,
yeah.
You know. I think this is a really interesting question, because what makes us who we are?
Yeah.
You know, sometimes we can attribute it to genetics, but sometimes it's not something we can even understand.
Yes.
You know, it comes from something beyond.
The physical realm.
Right.
Maybe. Yes.
Yeah.
How do you get into integrative medicine and being a breathwork practitioner in South Africa? Is there pathways that are now solid in the research and in the, let's say, the legal realm? Because I just heard your conversation with Dr. Matara outside about being able to call yourself a practitioner and things. How do you get into that?
So in terms of integrative medicine,
Yes.
when I started to move into this field of more holistic medicine, integrative medicine was a very new concept, certainly in South Africa.
Yes.
And I really struggled to find a place to train specifically in integrative medicine then.
Yes.
I couldn't actually. And it's just through my own self-study that I kind of integrated modalities that made sense to me.
Yeah.
So, you know, trained myself in mind-body medicine. I studied a modality called body talk. You know, I taught myself around basic nutritional foundational principles,
Yes.
and went back to Ayurveda.
Yeah.
And just kind of drew in threads of all of those modalities that I felt made sense to me.
Yeah.
And it was when I came across breathwork that I found this profound and simple technology of healing that we all have access to. And it's through my study of the science of breathwork that I started to weave it into my practice more, and then started an organization called Breathwork Africa.
Yes.
And I really feel passionate about sharing the art and science of breathing, conscious breathing, with as many people as possible, because it is such a simple and empowering tool.
Yeah.
And, you know, the field of breathwork has now exploded, and internationally.
Yes. Sure.
And so I'm part of an organization called the International Breathwork Foundation and the Global Professional Breath Alliance. And so we're starting to create some standards.
Okay, wow. Yeah.
So, you know, for breathwork practitioners.
Yes.
And I think it's really important. And, you know, as much as breathwork is natural and is available to all of us, and there are many practitioners in the field of yoga and psychology who use breathing techniques, I feel that it's a field that is growing and deepening so much that we need to kind of regulate what the certification means.
Yes.
And I think this will become even more important. So it's still a little bit of the gray area at the moment in terms of the actual terminology of what to call oneself when practicing breathwork. But Breathwork Africa, as part of the Global Professional Breath Alliance, is really working to create some solid standards.
Yeah, which is important because, I mean, I did a course on Udemy in breathwork, and obviously taught me good foundations for myself personally, but it gives you a certificate that says breathwork practitioner.
Wow.
And after 4 weeks of doing once a week a video thing, I would never be able to call myself an expert in that field, but they give you the certificate. And I'm pretty sure there are people out there that then go and call themselves, you know, experts in breathwork.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things that standards and ethics have to become central to the practice.
Yeah. And I think it's difficult because we're just entering that time now.
Yeah.
You know, And yeah, so that's where we're at. But
So-
in terms of integrative medicine, I
Yes.
think, there are so many organizations that offer training in integrative
Okay.
medicine specifically, and mainly focused on functional medicine.
Do you have to be a medical doctor to be able to do these courses, or does this give you a whole nother qualification as such?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are integrative health coaching courses, but those are coaching courses, and they're based on the principles of functional medicine, and that's great. So there are many coaches who are bringing that into their work.
Yes.
But obviously, if you're a medical doctor, you can't call yourself an integrative medical doctor unless,
Yes.
yeah.
You've
So
done the courses and do you do it at a university or is it private institutions?
there are many institutions that offer integrative medicine. I don't know of any universities in South Africa that
Okay.
offers integrative medicine
Yeah,
specifically. Yeah.
Yeah.
So homeopathy would be the closest to
Yes. Yeah, I've seen a rise in a lot of homeopathic practitioners. Just driving around, you see the boards. And I think 10 years ago, you didn't see so many of that. So I want to break down breathwork a little bit because when people hear breathwork, they think, but I breathe naturally. How can that help me? But obviously there's a pattern of breathing, or many patterns of breathing, and then conscious breathing. And I've seen people use breathing and breathwork in sports performance now. You've seen guys like Wim Hof come about. I'm going to open the floor up to you just to explain, what do you mean when you say breathwork?
Yeah, that's a great question. And yes, when people say we breathe all the time, they're right, because we do.
Yeah.
So breathing is one of our autonomic nervous system functions. It's one of the ways in which the body maintains balance and homeostasis. Okay.
Yeah.
But our automatic breath is also a language. And so it reflects our physical state, our emotional state, our posture is
Yes.
all reflected in the way that we breathe. So if we're feeling anxious, when we're feeling stressed, then we tend to breathe high up in the chest, for example.
Yeah.
So our breathing changes to match what we are experiencing.
Okay.
Okay. But when we bring conscious awareness to the breath, then that offers us an opportunity to change the way we think, change the way we feel. So breathing is the only autonomic nervous system function that we are able to consciously override.
Okay. Yes.
So by changing the way we inhale, changing the way we exhale, changing the rate and the rhythm and the volume of our breath, we are able to change our physiological state. And in fact, it's an entry point to shift our entire physiological makeup and function,
Yeah.
which is also then linked to our psychology. And in really deepening the study of the breath, we can appreciate that changing our breath will impact our psychological state, it will impact our posture, and every physiological system, from the lymphatic system to the digestive system to the circulatory system, every function is impacted when we change the way we breathe, which is why it has such wide applications.
Yes.
So it's used in sports performance, it's used in art performance, in singing.
Yes.
It can be applied in the field of psychology, of medicine, of energy healing. It's really so vast and so deep.
Yes. And you're obviously very much an expert in this because of your book. And I know you wrote a book before this, and you did a book with a photographer, I believe, which I'll also link to. And in this book specifically, you speak about the energy systems. Can you tell me how that works, and what does that mean, and then how does that connect to our breath?
Yeah. So about 8 or 9 years ago, I started to see an interesting trend of people experiencing burnout.
Yes.
And this was showing up in physical symptoms, emotional symptoms. And I realized that a lot of the niggles that I was seeing, people coming in with irritable bowel syndrome, or insomnia, or chronic headaches, was part of people being in what we call this sympathetic overdrive.
Yes.
This fight-flight mode, being overstimulated and being locked into this adrenalized energy mode,
Yes.
which we can sustain for a while, but we reach a tipping point where the body is unable to maintain this adrenalized energy, okay? And we start to deplete our energy resources. And that's when we dip into a state of burnout, where we feel more tired than wired. And so I created a system called the Energy Zone Map, which is an awareness tool to get people to understand whether they are in danger of burnout, are they in this this phase of adrenalized energy, which is the precursor to actual burnout, or whether they are in burnout zone. So it looks at the physical and behavioral kind of symptoms, which will point to which zone they're in. And then how to take responsibility for that, how to support their system back to a state of balance.
Yeah.
And it was really about, activating these recovery loops again. So this conscious activation of the parasympathetic mode that allows the body to start to heal itself. So we're not building this inflammation in the system.
Yeah.
And so that's really what the book is based on. And also how to support our energy, and prevent burnout by supporting body's intelligence, mind's intelligence, and heart's intelligence. So when we looked at body's intelligence, it was about really looking at the foundation of our physical health. So that is, eating the food that loves us back, It's looking at how to move in a conscious way, because I saw a lot of people who were exercising when they were already burnt out and exacerbating the burnout. Right.
Yes.
So, endurance runners and people who just over-exercise, and it just kind of takes them down that rabbit hole and that slippery slope to burnout.
Yes. So burnout is not just a mental thing from the stress that you go through every day. It could be a physical reason for it as well.
Yeah, I think this is how I started to see it, that from a psychological perspective, there's a definite kind of way that burnout is seen. It's from a psychological point of view.
Yes.
And it's the World Health Organization looks at it in terms of a work-related burnout, but
Yes.
One cannot separate what we experience emotionally and what we're experiencing physically. And so psychologists were looking at burnout in terms of psychological symptoms. Medical doctors and homeopaths looking at burnout in terms of adrenal fatigue.
Yes.
But actually, if we look at it together, we can see that it's the same thing that's happening.
Yes.
And it was important for me to put that picture together, to create that holistic picture, that it is connected.
So what is adrenal fatigue exactly?
But adrenal fatigue is when the adrenals are not able to cope with the demands of stress hormones any longer. So when we have an acute stress response, the adrenal glands that sit on top of the kidneys release two hormones. The fast track is adrenaline, followed by cortisol. Okay. So the body is able to maintain this, or the adrenal glands are able to cope with releasing these two hormones from the different parts of the adrenal glands. But there comes a point where the adrenals get exhausted.
Yes.
So they're not able to cope with the production of cortisol any longer. And that's when we see cortisol levels drop.
Yeah.
So in the initial phase, it goes up, and there's a tipping point where it starts to crash. And that's when we experience the overwhelming fatigue. It's difficult to get out of bed in the morning. There's just like a shutdown of the system.
Yeah.
And we see chronic illness developing in that stage as well. Also inflammatory markers rising rapidly.
Cortisol levels that are too high and too low, which one, where do we want them to be, and how do we measure those?
Yeah, so cortisol is not a bad hormone. We need cortisol in order to survive. It's part of the body's energy system.
Yeah.
And there's a natural rhythm of cortisol that is released in the body in a circadian rhythm. So when we wake up in the morning and the sun rises, there's a natural rise of cortisol. It gets us out of bed in the morning as the melatonin levels drop.
Okay.
Okay, so the receptors in our eyes will pick up the light stimulus, and it will drop the melatonin, and cortisol will go up. Okay, and then it dips slightly again at about 10 a.m. And that's when we feel a little bit of an energy dip, and that's why, we want a little cup of tea or coffee.
Yes.
And then we'll see a rise of cortisol again at about midday, and then quite a dip at around 4 p.m. The mid-afternoon slump
Yes.
can also be attributed to this drop in cortisol. And then after about 10 at night, okay,
Yeah, a bit of a helicopter.
10 p.m. there's quite a significant drop as melatonin goes up,
Yeah.
and then we feel sleepy. So
Yes.
that's a natural rhythm of cortisol. When we have an acute stress, okay, then there's a shoot up of cortisol. So cortisol and adrenaline kind of shoots up,
Yes.
and then once we come down to balance again, once we rest, or once that acute stress has been kind of dealt with, then the body comes back to normal. And we know when there's a chronic stress response, then there's a constant firing. And then adrenaline and cortisol is released in the system more than it should.
Yes.
And so we get locked into this adrenalized energy mode.
What type of illness can occur from this adrenalized energy mode?
Well, it creates a state of inflammation in the system.
Okay.
Okay. And when the body is inflamed, it can lead to the genes that we've perhaps inherited for certain illnesses to be switched on. So we
Yes.
know this now from the science of epigenetics, okay?
Yeah.
That those genes will be expressed when the system is stressed, okay? When the system is inflamed, okay?
Yeah.
So it will exacerbate those diseases will start to become expressed. Okay. What can also happen with the chronic release of adrenaline and cortisol is a dampening of the immune system.
Okay.
Okay, so
Yes.
we get predisposed to infections. So, it creates a whole ripple effect in the
Yeah.
system, where we're creating the conditions for disease to thrive, essentially.
Yeah. Why can we sometimes see so many people that have chronic inflammation, chronic bad diet, overweight, maybe they drink a lot and smoke, and they can live till 80 with no disease or no diabetes or anything like that, and then some people just 1 year of maybe falling off the tracks with your diet and your drinking habits, and they pick up some sort of illness or disease.
Yeah, that's a very complex.
Yeah, maybe it's
and it's
too
a
broad.
question. No, I don't think it's too broad at all. I think it's a very important question, and I think it speaks to how multidimensional we are.
Okay.
Okay. So, firstly, our health is influenced by the genes that we inherit.
Yes.
Okay, and whether those genes are switched on or switched off. Okay.
So we're genetically predisposed, but it doesn't mean necessarily that if you have the gene, you're going to get sick. That's got to be switched on.
That's really important,
Yes.
because we have the ability to switch genes on and switch genes off.
Okay.
We know this now
Yes.
through the science of epigenetics.
Yes.
Okay. And so that's one layer of influence. All right. Our belief systems, so the way that we perceive the world, is vitally important in the way illness is expressed or not. Okay, so when we are fear-based, for example, then we will be triggered by many things in our environment. We'll be triggered by our own thoughts,
Yes.
and the body doesn't know the difference between an actual stressor and just what we're thinking about. So we may be constantly firing the stress response without even realizing it. Okay,
Yeah.
so that's a layer of influence. What we eat, of course, is a layer of influence. Our environment, whether we're exposed to pollutants or not, is another layer of influence.
Yeah.
Whether we feel loved and supported and connected is another layer of influence. So, all of these factors connect and will determine how illness is expressed.
Yes. Don't worry about it. Sorry, are you done with that point? I didn't want to interrupt you. So where does breathwork then fit into this in terms of the healing process?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we work with breathing in a very multidimensional way. So we work with breath awareness. Okay, so this is simple becoming aware of the fact that we are breathing. And when we become aware that we're breathing, we can become aware of everything else. We can become aware of our thoughts. We can become aware of our feelings and emotions. We can become aware of what our body is communicating to us. So it's a light switch. Okay. Yes. So it's an entry point in becoming conscious rather than just going through the motions of life. Yes. Okay. It's a light switch that can go on. So now we're becoming aware. And when we can become aware, then it gives us the opportunity to make a choice. And so then we use breath regulation. And so this is consciously changing the way we breathe in everyday life.
Okay.
And in the realm of breath regulation, we have breathing that will help us to energize the system. So energizing techniques, we have balancing techniques, and we have relaxing techniques. Okay. And so this becomes a very helpful toolkit that we can now pick and choose on techniques to help us in our everyday life. When we need to fall asleep, we can use a simple, relaxing practice. When we feel overwhelmed, there's a certain technique we can use. When we feel like we have an energy slump and we just need to boost energy, there's a certain practice. We need courage before an exam or before a sports match. There's a certain technique that we can practice. So it becomes just a way of supporting every aspect of our life. And then we have breathing that is transformative and healing. Okay, so these are deeper practices.
Yes.
For example, conscious connected breathing that has its roots in the rebirthing movement and holotropic breathing.
Yes.
These are breathing techniques that are facilitated by a breathwork practitioner, okay, that will induce a transpersonal state.
Sorry, I have to interrupt you to emphasize that point because I've heard of people watching YouTube videos on this type of breathing and then trying to do it at home by themselves. So can we just say that again?
Yeah. Okay. So these deeper transformative practices are facilitated by a qualified breathwork practitioner who is trained to hold the safe space in order for people to enter this transpersonal state and allows access into the subconscious where deeply held traumas are held.
Yes.
Okay. So this is an intensely powerful modality that when is facilitated skillfully can be incredibly life-changing.
Yes. I've heard of cases where it could result in, what is the word? Outcomes that are similar to maybe taking psychedelic drugs. Can you just talk through some of the things that people experience when going through a process like this with you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really what people are ready for. There's some people who have a completely blissful experience, a life-changing light bulb moment where they're having direct experience of, the essence of who they are.
Yes.
Some people just, enjoy a deep relaxation. And often, because we are breathing in a way that allows access to the subconscious, whatever is available and ready to come up to the surface might arise. And that could be anything from birth trauma to a childhood experience that was forgotten, or perhaps it's not even a conscious memory. There's just a deep emotional release of a trauma, and it could be released as, in the form of laughter or tears, or there's some kind of catharsis, even some kind of, the body moving in different ways. So, it's a profound and deep therapy.
Yeah. And it comes down to trauma. Maybe, I don't know how how grounded this is in the sciences, but my belief in it at least is that trauma can really manifest and sit somewhere in the body on a cellular level, and has a physical way of manifesting. Do you want to just talk a bit about that and explain that?
Yeah, I really believe that, and we know that emotion is in a form of energy, and it's a powerful form of energy. And if you even look at the word emotion, it's energy in motion.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so emotion, its natural state is movement. It needs to be expressed.
Okay.
Okay, so every emotion has a role. So fear has the role of protection. Anger is an intensely energizing emotion that gets us mobilized to take action. Sadness opens our heart so that we can feel more connected and have more compassion and empathy. Okay. So
Yes.
every natural emotion has a powerful role. When that emotion is not allowed to be expressed for whatever reason that is, or it's an intense emotion that is felt at a particular time, that energy of that emotion can get frozen into the system. And Thomas Hubel speaks about this beautifully in terms of trauma being frozen emotion, right?
Yeah.
And through these healing practices, we can start to thaw out that frozen, stuck emotion,
Yes.
and open the body so that it can be expressed and be freed, and really that's what healing is.
The freeing of emotion and trauma is what it comes down to.
So that the body is able to drop into a state of safety and relaxation.
Yes. And that is known scientifically as the parasympathetic state. Is that correct?
Right.
Awesome.
And so we won't drop into that healing parasympathetic state if we do not perceive safety.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important, especially in our current context, where we're perceiving everything as a threat.
Yeah.
An invisible threat, we can't see people's faces. So, we can't read cues around us. And, we are so hypervigilant around this virus particle that we can't see. So, we're mounting this constant stress response. We're constantly perceiving danger. And what is that doing to our psychological system, to the state of inflammation in the system? So we're seeing chronic sympathetic overdrive and the physical and psychological manifestations of that. And so our work then in understanding that is to find ways to consciously activate the relaxation response, to find ways to train the relaxation response back into the system. And that's where breathing comes in, because we know that we can immediately and powerfully and simply do that just with one conscious breath.
One of the questions was on COVID-19 and what it's doing to us, but I think you've just explained and described that perfectly, is that constant state of stress and fear that we're living in, coupled with the life stresses that we're dealing with.
Exactly.
Anyway.
We came into this from a low base.
Yes.
Yeah.
One of my friends said to me, it's like when you're driving, you at a heightened state of alertness and things, and that's why we have road rage. And it seems like the whole world is now driving in bad weather and bad traffic. Everyone's alert and shouting at each other and hypervigilant and things.
Yeah.
What is your perceived pathway out of the state that we're in at the moment as a collective?
Wow. Yeah. I think that each and every one of us have a responsibility to find ways to be radically compassionate towards ourselves and each other. Radical compassion.
Radical compassion.
A radical compassion is what we're needing.
That's very
just
cool.
like a really understanding that we are all in this, that we have a responsibility to ourselves to connect with ourselves, with each other, and with nature. We need to come back to basic principles. The most complex problems require the most simple solutions. And so now is the time just to get back to our basic humanity our basic connections with each other and the wisdom of our own incredible bodies.
Yes. One of the doctors I've spoken to recently said to me, radically expand your awareness. And I think that ties in very nicely to what you've been saying. And what he does actually is he takes people into forests for walks and things. He's a psychiatrist, but he's treating people on a more holistic basis, as we'll know.
I really believe in that. Nature therapy,
yes.
Absolutely.
And even just by yourself going on a hike or spending some time in your garden, I think it's very powerful. I've been putting up bird feeders all over my garden now, and it's amazing to walk out in the morning and just hear them chirping and things. There's definitely a sense of peace that it gives you.
Yeah. And one doesn't have to go far.
No.
One just has to wake up to the fact that nature is all around us, and to work in harmony with nature again, but also to understand that we are part of nature. We're not separate.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is nature. Our bodies is an expression of nature.
Yes. We've been seeing a lot of talk recently on plant medicine, growing in even universities in the States doing research on this. Where are you on things like psilocybin as a way of treating certain things?
Look, I think it has a role. I think anything that is safely supporting people to connect with who they are beyond their fear is powerful.
Yeah.
But of course, I think that there's a risk of misusing it or kind of using it for recreational purposes.
Yes.
I think that there's sacred medicine, a plant medicine that is important, that's necessary. It's part of our indigenous culture.
Yes.
But it's to be used with great respect.
Yeah. Similar to maybe the breathwork, to have someone trained
Absolutely.
to lead you through that process. In terms of cannabis, how can we look at stuff like that, CBD and things, as a way of not putting all your hope in it, but just as a way of using it maybe, as you said, in a responsible manner, to heal things like insomnia or chronic anxiety? Do you think that's something that should be more integrated into our medicine?
Yeah, I think, like with anything, as long as it's used with awareness, that it's not used as a crutch, that is not used in a way that is disempowering, but is always supporting your body's ability to heal itself.
Yes.
So, this is not about good or bad. We can use breath work in a way that is harmful. We can use plant medicine in a way that is harmful. We can eat a vegan diet, the most healthy, seemingly healthy diet, in a way that is going to cause us harm.
Yes.
So I think it's really about being very conscious and aware of how we're engaging with this and what it's supporting and what it's taking away from.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. Oh. There's always a case of when something comes to the fore, then people jump on that train, and it's the only thing that works. Similar to diet and diet trends, when veganism becomes a trend, and people jump on it just for the sake of jumping on it.
Because we want a quick fix, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Our human system is designed to just want to kind of take away pain now.
Yes.
We want instant gratification. We want the quick fix solution.
Yes.
The magic bullet, if you will.
Yeah.
And there is no magic bullet. There is no one thing that is going to take away all your ills. At the end of the day, it is dependent on us to be responsible for our thoughts, our feelings, our choices.
Yes.
Yeah. And that healing is a journey that requires awareness of all the aspects of who we are.
Yes.
And unless we're really, really doing that deep emotional work, then, even seemingly conscious or healthy practice can be a distraction,
yes.
Can be a form of spiritual bypass. So the work is really about being embodied, and kind of coming back down so that we are able to listen to the wisdom of our body and to support the physical body's perfect design.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to say that again. To really respect the body's perfect design to facilitate the flow of consciousness.
Yes. Consciousness often being used alongside awareness, coming to the fore greatly with things like meditation and yoga, teaching us to be aware of our movement and control our movement and behaviors. How does spirituality fit into that model of conscious healing and conscious awareness?
Well, I think it's one and the same. You know, for me, spirituality is not an esoteric concept. It's a very grounded practice of awareness of what is. And it's a sense of connection to who we are, but who we are in relation to something that is greater than us.
Yes. And that could be in the form of religion, or just something that some belief system that you hold inherently, but also it could be just something that you feel, an energy of some sort. For example, if I have to get personal, dealing with my belief systems as a kid, that this is the religion and this is how we do it, and then what I experience as an adult, and the conflict between the traditional way of teaching you this is how you say your prayer and this is how you eat and whatever it is, and then but this is what I actually feel the universe or the connectedness is telling me what to do.
Yeah. You know, I think the difference is whether you feel that the something greater is outside of you and disconnected from you, or whether you feel that you are part of it,
Yes.
that it resides within you. And for me, that's what spirituality really is honoring the fact that this greater is also within us, that we are part of it.
Yes.
Rather than something that we are just, handing over to.
Yes. Yeah, we have to take our responsibility as being part of whatever it is that we thinking of or speaking about, rather than saying something else is going to take care of me.
Right.
Yeah. Is that kind of what you're trying to say?
Yeah, which, it is that. It is the surrender to something, but it's at the same time, it's about taking responsibility.
Yes.
And sometimes we don't take responsibility because we are handing over.
Yeah.
And I think it's both. It's like the inhale and exhale, where the inhale is about, could be seen as taking responsibility. And the exhale is just about surrendering then to something that's greater.
Yes.
And I think it's both.
That's a very interesting point. Yeah. I want to just shift gears a little bit. Maybe it ties in, but I've seen a lot of people that have very, very severe cases of self-damaging behaviors that they seem to not be able to get out of. They're trying to fix themselves, so they change their diet, they start exercising, but they fail in that process, and then they end up going too far after their failure in, what is the word they use, self-harming or self-sabotage. That's the one I'm looking for. So that's quite a big problem in terms of people wanting to get better and heal, is this case of self-sabotage and a disliking of yourself, or maybe a hatred of yourself even. How do people learn to start caring for themselves better, start loving themselves? Everyone knows they should, when they're sick, that they should get better, but to put in that work, which is sometimes a lot of hard work, how do we get people to love themselves more?
Yeah, it's an interesting question about loving ourselves. And it's something that I've thought about a lot. And for me, it's not about loving ourselves.
Okay.
Because it's an action.
Yes.
For me, it's about experiencing ourselves as love.
Okay. Got to wrap my head around that.
Okay. So it's not something that we have to do, like an action. I need to love myself. This is our natural state, is love.
Is love. Okay.
So we're talking about that greater, that experience we have when we are in awe, when we are seeing a magnificent sunset, or there's just something about the light that just makes everything look magical. It's like a still point moment. And in that moment, we just feel expanded.
Yes.
That is having a direct experience of ourselves as love, as something that is so magnificent
Yes.
and great. It's a feeling we have when we are looking into the eyes of a newborn.
Yeah.
That state of being. So love is a state of being which is inherently natural to who we are. The rest is just fear. The rest is just neural pathways based in fear.
Yes.
Neural pathways that have just become ruts in the body-mind system. And so that's why I love breathwork so much, that it offers people the opportunity to express, or rather to experience themselves as love.
Yes.
Doesn't mean that it's permanently going to be there now when they come out of the session, not at all. But at least they've had that experience.
Yeah.
They've had
aware.
that the light bulb has gone on. And now the work is to start to create the new neural pathways, love-based neural pathways, and to practice those, like learning any new skill, like learning to drive a car, like learning to play the piano. It takes practice. It takes consistency. It takes support.
Yes.
And it takes daily work. It takes a daily conscious choice to spark up those new neural pathways.
Yes.
And eventually, we start to live from that place. Eventually, that becomes habitual. And that old neural pathway is still there, but at least we have a new wiring in the body-mind system.
Yeah.
And so for me, that's what this work is really about. That's all our work, is to knit up and spark up the new neural pathways of love.
Yes.
Within us and between us.
And I think the positive message in that really is that no matter how old you are or where you have been in life, you're not destined to that fate of maybe being ill or being sick. The whole process of neuroplasticity and neurogenesis shows us that you can rewire your brain and you can switch off and on your genes, as epigenetics showed us. So the purpose and the goal of the podcast is to show people that it's never too late. You can find help and you can change, which is the beauty of maybe our bodies and our minds.
And the human being is that we have this capacity.
Yes.
It's so beautiful.
It is indeed. What type of breathwork practices would you... So let's say I've come in and I've seen you as a client and I'm just an anxious person. What is one basic breath count or breathwork practice that someone can implement themselves on a daily basis just to deal with some anxiety?
The first thing we do is we retrain the diaphragm. Okay. So when we're in this adrenalized state, the diaphragm, which is our main breathing muscle, gets locked. Okay. As we use the neck and the shoulder muscles to breathe, these accessory muscles. So the first thing is not really about the technique. It's waking up the diaphragm again. Once we wake up the diaphragm, then the body knows how to breathe. Yes, we can use techniques to support that, but the basis, the foundation of healthy principles, they're just a few. Work with the diaphragm, to get that flexible again.
Yes.
Learn to breathe through your nose in everyday life.
Yeah.
50% of people are chronic mouth breathers.
Wow.
Okay. And that has a whole ripple effect on how we experience our health.
Yes.
And this is just research that is recently coming out. It's fascinating. And I encourage everyone who's interested in this to read a book that's recently published called Breath. Okay. It's the new science of a lost art.
Yes.
By James Nestor.
Yes.
It's really fascinating. And in reading this, one can also appreciate the importance of learning to breathe through our noses again, which is the design. This isn't how we naturally designed to breathe through our nose in everyday life. Of course, there are certain practices that involve breathing through the mouth, but that's very specific, and that's all to serve really breathing through the nose in everyday life. So it's about really waking up our breath intelligence.
Yes.
So I've also co-created this framework of understanding the parameters of healthy breathing called BQ, Parameters in Breath Intelligence.
BQ for the intelligence.
Breath intelligence.
Yes, awesome. Yes. So as you were speaking, I was trying to focus on my diaphragm. I've recently spoken to a lady who works with women as a biokineticist, and she uses breathwork to engage with the pelvic floor.
Yes.
I'm asking this question specifically because she knows you well and I think she admires you a bit. So maybe you can speak on that in terms of, because I don't really understand that. So I don't know how to phrase my question.
Okay.
But she was very interested in the pelvic floor and breathwork as a way of reconnecting. Can you
here's another fascinating thing about the breath, right?
Yeah.
And so when we look at the diaphragm, which is the main breathing muscle, it's a dome-shaped muscle, and it's quite three-dimensional, right?
Okay.
And inspiration actually begins with the contraction of the diaphragm as it flattens and the belly moves out, and this creates an expansion of the lungs. That's an inhalation, okay? But the diaphragm is also connected to our connective tissue called the fascia. Okay. So fascia is like, if you're a meat eater, and you'll know it's like the white fiber that you see between the muscle fibers.
It connects the entire
It connects
muscle
everything
system
to everything. Okay. And we have various fascial lines. And so if you really look at the way the fascial lines are organized, we'll see that the soles of the feet are directly connected to the tongue, for example, that they're fascial lines that connect the shoulder to the hip. Okay, so we have back fascial lines, frontal lines, back lines, and the diaphragm is intricately connected to all these fascial lines. So when we breathe and the diaphragm moves, we are impacting the movement of all our muscles. And all our organs. Okay. So the organs of our digestive system, the organs of our reproductive system is all working together. So the psoas muscle, which is a major muscle group that is often tight in many of us that sit at the desk all day or we're cycling a lot, the psoas muscle gets tight.
That's the hip flexor.
That's right. So when the psoas muscle tightens, it's going to pull on the diaphragm and immobilize the diaphragm. Okay. And when the diaphragm is immobilized, what that means is that we're going to use the smaller muscles of the neck and shoulders to breathe, which means that the brain is getting a message that we're anxious.
Okay. Wow, yeah. Just because of the tight psoas muscles.
So we can see the chain.
Yes.
The chain reaction that's happening. And so if you have tight psoas muscles, you're going to be predisposed to anxiety. If you chronically breathe through your mouth without realizing it, you're going to be prone to anxiety.
Yes. Wow. So I mean, as a psychologist dealing with a patient with anxiety, we really can no longer look at it as just something that's going wrong in the brain. It could be gut related, which we could touch on. It could be this related. So the importance of holistic ways of looking at things is very important.
Absolutely.
Paramount.
And the breath is an entry point.
Yes.
And once again, we're not offering a panacea for every ill, but it is an entry point.
Yes.
And as I said, when we're breathing optimally, we're going to give the digestive system the best opportunity to rebalance itself. We're giving our brain the best opportunity to access the higher cognitive abilities and our ability to connect and have empathy.
Yes.
We are dampening the activity of that stress response triggered by the amygdala, which is the panic button of the brain.
Yes.
Okay, and we're increasing the connections between our higher functioning and our limbic brain so that we are able to self-regulate more. And we are able to build our capacity for intensity.
Yes.
And hold a wider range of emotional, energetic, and mental experiences without tipping over into overwhelm and panic, and without numbing out or disconnecting.
Wow. What you just said, I'm going to make a clip of that as a way to market this episode, because I think after listening to that a few times to grasp what you've just said, it's pretty profound. just to touch on the nutritional side of things and our gut health, gut microbiome. I don't know how much you work in this field, but I'm pretty sure you have good knowledge on it. So why is that important? Can you explain why looking after our gut health and our microbiome and our gut is so important?
Yeah, well, we know that the gut is another brain. There's a rich neural network, okay? And that the gut microbiome plays a very important role as part of the gut's intelligence. And we're only starting to understand now the role of the gut microbiome in mental health.
Yes.
And we know that gut microbiome, which is the natural balance of healthy bacteria, is so disrupted because of the kinds of food that we eat that is grown in an environment that is so rich in pesticides and we won't go into that whole story, but we know.
Yeah, it's a whole other episode, I think.
The point is that we all have disrupted gut microbiomes, and especially now with all the overuse of sanitizers.
Yes.
I really worry about the impact on the gut microbiome.
Yes.
So I think, it's about, once again, going back to basic principles, taking probiotic if we need to, but ideally we want to go back to eating food that is grown organically.
Yes.
As much as possible. Eating food that is naturally fermented.
Yes.
Natural ways of living and eating. We're going back to our roots again.
Yeah.
So I think that's just, kind of a basic overview.
Yes. I kind of stumbled across that because my fiance had some health issues related to autoimmune things, and just by her changing the way she eats and approaches life caused me to, and when I did it, my severe cases of anxiety started to disappear, and bouts of just mentally being not where I want to be, just simply from going organic in as many things as we can, which is a difficult thing to do. And I think people almost give up because of the convenience of just going to any store and buying your food, and also the just understanding what organic really is and where to find things that are really organic. I mean, some supermarkets claim to have organic things that aren't organic. So how do you do it? I'm sure you follow that type of lifestyle. How do you ensure that everything you take in is organic?
No, I don't succeed at that at all.
Okay, cool.
But it's something that I constantly try and work towards.
Yes.
So I'm trying really hard to grow my own vegetables and herbs,
awesome.
and with varying success. It's hard work.
Yes.
But it's so gratifying. And it's just beautiful to be part of the process of growing something and then just picking it and eating it immediately. Yes.
Yeah.
And I think we're going back to that.
Yeah.
I have a dream of us having communal gardens and community gardens, and in many ways it's happening. That trend is growing, and there's always this idea that eating organically is expensive, but I don't think it has to be that way.
No.
I think if we start to reimagine the way we grow food and we work as communities, I think that this is the way forward,
Yeah. So what is your personal diet look like? I think we all obviously change it as we go along, but your ideal way of eating, are you a vegan or a vegetarian, or just
so mainly vegetarian? I do eat seafood.
Okay.
I don't eat red meat at all.
Yeah.
Just because I don't enjoy it. Because, I really think that it's about basic principles. We're all unique.
Yes.
We all have our own kind of tradition, way that we grew up, genetic predisposition,
Yes.
and food that works for us. So I think the basic principle is, to have a Mediterranean-based diet.
Yes.
Okay, of whole grains, lots of fruit and vegetables, very limited red meat, okay, to have healthy fats and oils,
Yes.
to eat seasonally, to eat locally.
Yes.
So I love this concept of being a locavore, eating
Oh,
food
wow.
that is grown in your environment. And studies
Yes.
have shown that the body is able to assimilate the nutrients from food that is grown in your natural environment best.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah. Locavore. It's a
Yeah.
very cool term.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I try and at all costs to avoid eating any food that is imported.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
And just to eat locally as much as possible, ideally from my own garden. But if that's not possible, food that is grown kind of in
Yeah.
my environment. So I do my shopping at the local fruit and veg rather than a chain.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I suppose it's one step closer.
Yeah. It's also one of those things that you don't realize the benefits until you've changed. I mean, a lot of people would just shop at a local chain and feel they're quite fine. You know, they may feel healthy, they're not overweight, they're not mentally struggling. But once you make the change and you start becoming aware and conscious about it, then you realize the amount of energy and abundance that your life can have.
Absolutely.
Just through the food you eat.
And you know, when the system is out of balance, we tend to crave food that will exacerbate the imbalance.
Yes.
And as we move towards balance, we naturally crave the food that is going to support balance. I found that.
So if I go through periods where I'm just craving chocolates for some reason, or craving carbs and whatever, and then there's times where I can go months without even thinking about it. Would you?
Yeah.
And I have been able to kind of point towards it being when things in my life are in order and when things in my life are a bit chaotic. So would you say that's basically
Oh, yes.
what it's come down to?
Absolutely. You know, through this whole lockdown experience, I've been pretty kind of stable emotionally. Well, so I thought.
Yes.
Until I realized that I started developing this weird craving for condensed milk.
Interesting.
Like I would just buy condensed milk.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I had a taste of it somewhere and it like stuck with me and I just craved this condensed milk and I would like go past the fridge and just like take a spoon of condensed milk like a drug.
Yeah.
Because that was the effect it was like a shot of cocaine maybe. I don't think I've ever had cocaine. But like, it felt like, just like.
A little stronger than condensed milk.
It was just my form.
Yeah.
And so I've started to become aware now when I have that craving for condensed milk. What's going on? I'm tired, or I'm suppressing an emotion, or I need more rest, or something's going on.
Yes.
And so that's been my little kind of cue.
Yes.
You know?
And it's important to have cues to know when you are maybe not paying attention to something in your life. Yeah.
I still have the condensed milk though.
Oh,
every now and again.
We also human. Mine is definitely chocolate. When I start buying chocolates for no reason, then I think something's up. Something's up.
Yeah.
Time to pay attention.
Yeah.
Just to get on to sleep and the importance of sleep and maybe the role cortisol, we've touched on that, plays in sleep. You've touched on melatonin, which I think is released in the pineal gland, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's right.
Do you want to talk about that and why that is so important? These are blue light blocking glasses in order to limit, the artificial light and things, and it's helped me greatly. So do you want to touch on the science behind that?
I'm not an expert.
Not?
Yeah, let's cut that part out.
Okay. But you can speak about sleep and cortisol. Can we go to that?
Yes.
Rather? Okay. So let me say that rather, and then we can... to touch on sleep, the importance of sleep and the role cortisol and adrenaline plays in keeping us out of sleep. And this thing that they call sleep anxiety that I've recently started reading about it.
Yeah.
Do you want to maybe talk about that?
I mean, I think, a lot of why we are experiencing such a rise in sleep issues is because of the fact that we are in this hypervigilant state.
Yeah.
And so the body is constantly releasing these stress hormones and we can't switch the brain off. So, the brain gets wired. And so we become, addicted to this adrenalized energy and it shifts this whole cortisol cycle out of balance. So earlier I was speaking about how cortisol naturally drops when we're approaching like 10 p.m., for example,
Yes.
this doesn't happen
Okay.
when we are in this adrenalized state. So we almost have like a surge of adrenaline at that time rather than a dipping. And we see that happening quite often,
Yes.
which is also why, we are experiencing this issue. And so I advise that we start to repattern our circadian rhythm back to its natural state.
Yes.
And so that we start to prepare the body for sleep, that we can't just go from working on our devices and being on Zoom calls all day to try and fall asleep because we're still really wired. I know if I'm on a Zoom call, and try not to do this, but if, for example, I have a online meeting at 8 p.m., it'll be impossible for me to sleep.
Yeah.
Okay, because I'm still like, now my brain is switched on. And so it takes a long time to unwind, to actually activate like a wind down routine before my body is prepared for sleep.
Yeah.
And so this is something that I talk about as part of energy management, is having this ritual, this evening ritual of winding down. Okay, and whatever that means. So that could be a slight, it could be a breathwork practice. It could be some journaling. It could be listening to calming music. I use essential oils these days as lavender and beautiful essential oils to support the wind down. So it just depends what works for you. But to avoid the light from the backlight from devices, absolutely, because the backlight will activate that release of cortisol and will interfere with the production of melatonin.
Melatonin, yes. Some of the hardest things to do is to say, okay, I'm putting off the TV now, I'm putting my phone down, and I'm going to go lie in bed, read a book, listen to some calming music. People know they should do that, but we just tend to want to stay connected. More WhatsApps, more groups, and if things like improper breathing, improper sleep patterns play such a paramount role in our mental well-being, our overall well-being. And those are things you don't need a doctor to help you with. Those are just discipline and some choices you make and things. So I really wish that we can collectively start to pay attention to just our sleep and just our breath work as a way of taking care of ourselves.
It's a starting point, absolutely.
Yeah. I've got four more question, then we go on to some questions I ask everybody. I don't even know if we can speak about this, but I watched a video this morning about the infrared temperature readers that we're using all the time, and how the infrared signals pointed at the head interfere with the pineal gland.
Wow.
I don't know if you...
It's new.
I'll show you the video, or maybe send it to you so that you can, because this guy speaks about how it also interferes with our energy, and also that we're becoming used to having a gun pointed at our head. But the thing that stood out for me was the infrared signals that interfere with the pineal gland and its production of
That's fascinating.
Its hormones and things. Yeah. So I was going to ask if you've seen that video and if you can speak on that, but maybe I should first showing you the video first. Yeah. So I don't want you to name your book. I'll name your book. It's a great read. But if you can maybe say which 3 books you would recommend for people to read on the topics that we've spoken today.
Okay, good. So, my number one favorite at the moment is just because I've just read it.
Yeah.
Is Breath, The New Science of a Lost Art by James Nestor.
Okay.
And then, wow. Okay. Your Body Speaks Your Mind.
Speaks Your Mind.
Your Body Speaks Your Mind.
Okay.
By Deborah Shapiro. And that's on my shelf.
Awesome. Yes.
Wow, this is such a difficult question. Now to narrow it down to 3.
It's a hard one.
Nick.
Yeah, but I believe that the ones that come out now are the ones you've most recently read, and that's stuck with you. So I don't prepare you for this on purpose.
Yeah. A personal favorite. Well, I just love the work by Byron Katie.
Byron Katie.
Yeah.
Okay.
Who are you without your story? You know, and I think belief system work is so powerful in understanding what actually triggers our personal stress response. Because we all have different triggers.
Yes.
And when we can kind of delve into what is our trigger, what is the way that we see ourselves in the world, it's incredibly empowering.
Yes. Okay. So, Byron
Katie.
Katie, not Kelly. Katie. Okay. I'll link to those so that people can go have a look. So the next one also is going to come as a bit of a shock. What are the 5 most important things in your life right now?
Wow. Yeah, I think I've just become so aware of the joy of my home space and the people who support home being comforting and safe. And so home includes my husband and my dog and Dingy and Aggie, who really take care of us.
Yes.
And we are a little family, and I just really value that. My friends, my beautiful connections, and my community, my tribe, and I just very grateful for my friends.
Yes.
And nature,
Yeah.
nature is such a source of energy and support and connection for me. And my art, painting, is my
nice.
meditation, one of the forms of my meditation.
Yes.
And my breath, of course.
Of course. Yes. And those two often go together, the breath and the meditation and things. If you could speak to a younger version of yourself, what message would you give to her?
Not to be such a nerd, not to take life so seriously.
Yes.
To play more, to be more silly, to be less serious, I guess.
Yeah. I think that's very important.
Yeah.
I'm still young, so I can still be silly, but I think some people do tend to get caught up in their own life so much that they're extremely serious about it.
Yeah.
I want to give you opportunity to speak about the organization Breathwork Africa, just to tell people what it is and maybe where they can find out more about it.
Yeah, so Breathwork Africa is really it's an organization that was created with the aim to bring the tool of breathwork to more people, to make breathwork more accessible, to make conscious breathing more accessible to more people as a simple and empowering tool for healing and transformation. And so we do this in various ways. So we run one-on-one sessions. So we have a group of practitioners that offer one-on-one sessions. We also run workshops, and we offer webinars and training to organizations who want to support their people, their teams, in this skill. And we also do practitioner training. Okay. So we run a foundation course, a Breathwork foundation course, which is over 3 days. And it's just my favorite thing to facilitate because it's just a beautiful 3 days. And we also run advanced practitioner training for people who are specifically interested in becoming breathwork practitioners.
Yeah.
And so our training is in alignment with the International Breathwork Foundation's guidelines and the Global Professional Breath Alliance. So it complies with the international standards of breathwork training.
Awesome.
So and really our aim is to bring breathwork to rural communities and to schools and to businesses, not just in South Africa, but across the continent.
Yeah. And where can people find out? Is there a website they can go to?
Yeah, breathworkafrica.co.za. And they can also follow us on Instagram, breathwork_Africa.
Okay.
Breathwork_Africa, not dot.
Not dot,
Yeah.
You've written this book. You've written more books on this topic. Where can people that want to reach out to you or just find out more about this, besides Breathwork Africa, you personally, where can they reach you and find you?
Yes, so through my website, dreamwithdrelamanga.com.
Okay.
And also you can follow me on Instagram at Ela Manga.
At Ela Manga.
Ela Manga.
Yes. It's a very nice name. It flows off the tongue. It's nice to say. Doctor, thank you so much for your time and all your wisdom and your knowledge. Sorry, before I continue with my thanking, you've also started a podcast. Do you want to tell people about that?
Yes. Yeah, so that's very exciting. It's called Threads of Healing.
Okay.
And the idea of this podcast is to bring awareness to what healing means, not just for individual personal healing, but also the healing of societies and healing of our broken systems that we are seeing manifested in so many ways in our country. And so the idea is to speak to people who are healers in all spheres. So artists and activists and storytellers and entrepreneurs.
Yes.
We have so many amazing healers that come in all shapes and forms. And I really wanted to bring light to these incredible voices that are right here in Southern Africa.
Yes.
Back to the cradle of humankind.
Yes. So I love it. And it's exactly what I'm trying to do with this one is South Africa has so many amazing people.
Exactly.
We've got to start reaching out and spreading the knowledge.
And
the
celebrating each other.
Yes.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. So thank you. And appreciate your time. Appreciate what you do for the community and everything. And I'm very interested in the course you offer, the foundational course. Breathwork is something I would like to get better in and more knowledgeable in. So I'm going to try and sign up for that whenever the next one is. But thank you again for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Nick. It was wonderful to talk to you.
Awesome. Cool. We're formally done.
Cool.